The true story of Goliath and his brothers. One of the Bible's most popular stories is that of David and Goliath. The story's popularity may be attributed to David's victorious triumph over the giant. While Goliath is recognized by various ancient cultures and religions, little is known about his brothers, who were likewise giants. Again, the identity of Goliath and his brothers is often mistaken by people. However, we shall consider the true story of Goliath and his brothers to find out their origin and identity. Goliath the Philistine. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 2 through 7. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and sent the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath, of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's height weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. The Philistines had been longtime enemies of the Israelites. When Saul became king, he had to face the Philistines several times. The most notable of Saul's encounters with the Philistines was when Goliath appeared to be the champion of the Philistine army. Allow me to explain what a champion of an army was in those days. In the olden days, a champion of an army held a significant and revered position within military and combat contexts. The champion was an exceptional warrior chosen to represent and defend their army's interests in battles, contests, or individual combat scenarios. This role required not only exceptional physical prowess, but also unwavering courage, skill, and tactical knowledge. The champion served as a symbol of strength, honor, and bravery for their army or faction. They were often selected based on their reputation, demonstrated combat skills, and their ability to inspire and rally their comrades. The champion's primary objective was to secure victory for their side by defeating their opponents and instilling fear and doubt in the enemy ranks. Champions were frequently called upon to engage in single combat, where they would face off against a similarly appointed champion from the opposing army. These one-on-one duels were highly significant events and were meant to decide the outcomes of larger conflicts, settle disputes, or determine the fate of prisoners or hostages. And Goliath was the champion of the Philistine army. Goliath was a Philistine from the city of Gath. Citizens of the Gath are called Gittites. Goliath was addressed as a Gittite in 2 Samuel chapter 21, verse 19. He was over 9 feet tall. If you try to picture a giant above the height of 9 feet, you will understand how threatening the physique of Goliath was. In 2009, Sultan Kosen was identified as the tallest man measured by the Guinness World Record. He is a Turkish farmer of about 8 feet 3 inches in height. So presently, the tallest man in the world is not as tall as Goliath, above 9 feet in height. Aside from Goliath's imposing physical stature, his fortification as a seasoned warrior was truly remarkable. His defense seemed impenetrable. Clad in a formidable suit of bronze armor, including a helmet and a coat of mail weighing a staggering 125 pounds, Goliath was nearly invulnerable. Bronze protected his legs, and he confidently carried a shoulder-mounted bronze javelin. The sheer weight of his spear's shaft was comparable to a weaver's beam, and its spearhead alone weighed approximately 15 pounds. As if that weren't sufficient, Goliath was accompanied by an armor-bearer who marched ahead, wielding a broad shield capable of deflecting any arrow aimed at him. Firstly, Goliath's large shield, carried by his shield-bearer, posed a formidable obstacle for any arrow attempting to reach him. Secondly, even if an arrow managed to breach this defense, Goliath's own fortifications offered further protection. The sheer physical presence of Goliath alone was an intimidating threat to the Israelite army, and his robust defense system only exacerbated the challenge. The notion of an Israelite soldier successfully overcoming this heavily fortified giant seemed inconceivable. The Israelites were gripped with fear when Goliath, a formidable Philistine warrior, challenged them in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 8 through 11. He taunted them, questioned why they had come to battle, and offered a proposition. If any Israelite could defeat him, the Philistines would become their servants. But if Goliath emerged victorious, the Israelites would serve the Philistines. This challenge paralyzed the Israelites, as they saw the daunting task of overcoming Goliath as virtually impossible. The stakes were high, and anyone who dared to face Goliath not only risked their own life, but also endangered the entire Israelite army. Consequently, no one responded to Goliath's challenge for 40 days, and even King Saul sought refuge in his tent. Enter David, who arrived at the Israelite camp after 40 days and learned of Goliath's continuous threats. Though David was merely a young shepherd and ineligible to join the army, his indignation was stirred by Goliath's blasphemy against the God of the Jews. Against all odds, David offered to confront the giant. Initially, Saul hesitated, deeming David too young for the task. However, David recounted his previous experiences protecting his father's sheep from lions and bears, assuring Saul of his capability. Unyielding, David affirmed that he had faith in the Lord, not in conventional weapons of war. He boldly faced Goliath, who was infuriated by the sight of a young boy challenging him. David, armed with a sling and a stone, relied on divine strength. In contrast, Goliath brandished a sword, spear, and shield. David declared his trust in the Lord, asserting that he fought in the name of the God of Israel's armies. With his sling, he struck Goliath, rendering him defenseless. Seizing the opportunity, David used Goliath's own sword to behead him. Witnessing the fall of their champion, the Philistines fled, resulting in the disarray and defeat of their armies. The Israelites emerged victorious. In summary, the Israelites were paralyzed by fear when Goliath challenged them, but David, fueled by his faith in the Lord, confronted the giant and emerged triumphant, leading to the defeat of the Philistines' army. Now that we have some context surrounding Goliath, what may surprise a lot of people is that Goliath had brothers. Goliath was not the only giant in the land of the Philistines. He had brothers whose outlooks were also terrific. According to the information provided in the scriptures, Goliath had 4 relatives like him in physique and strength. There is somewhat of a debate surrounding the relation to Goliath with these individuals. However, we know they were all biologically related to Goliath. The mighty men of David finally killed all the descendants of Goliath. The narrative is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 21 verses 15 through 22 and 1 Chronicles chapter 20 verses 4 through 8. 1 Chronicles chapter 20 verses 4 through 8. And it came to pass after this, that there arose a war at Gezer with the Philistines, at which time Sibbechai and Hushathite slew Sippai. That was of the children of the giant, and they were subdued. And there was a war against the Philistines. And Elhanan the son of Jair slew Lahmi, the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, whose spear staff was like a weaver's beam. And yet again there was a war at Gath, where a man of great stature, whose fingers and toes were 24, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, and he also was the son of the giant. But when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimea, David's brother, slew him. These were born unto the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. Here in 1 Chronicles chapter 20 verse 5, the verse states specifically that Lahmi was a brother of Goliath. 2 Samuel chapter 21 verses 15 through 17 says, Moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel, and David went down, and his servants with them, and fought against the Philistines. And David waxed faint. And Ishbibenob, which was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass in weight, he, being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, succored him, and smote the Philistine, and killed him. Then the men of David swear unto him, saying, Thou shalt go no more out with us to battle, that thou quench not the light of Israel. Ishbi-benob is the second relative associated with Goliath. After David defeated Goliath, there were several other battles the Israelites fought with the Philistines, especially during the reign of David. During David's contest with Goliath, the relatives of Goliath were not mentioned. However, subsequent battles revealed that the brothers of the giant fought with David and his men, suggest they wanted to revenge the death of Goliath. The spear of Ishbi-benob weighed about 7 pounds. He was determined to kill David, but God rescued him through one of his mighty men, Abishai, who slew Ishbi-benob. Here, Ishbi-benob was mentioned as one of the sons of Goliath, the giant. The third relative of Goliath mentioned in the Bible is Saph. 2 Samuel chapter 21 verse 18 says, And it came to pass after this, that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite slew Saph, which was one of the sons of the giant. This is also a relative of Goliath, who was killed by Sibbecai, one of the men of David. Finally, 2 Samuel chapter 21 verse 20 through 22 introduces the last relative of Goliath that died through the hands of the men of David. The passage reads, And there was yet a battle in Gath, where a man of great stature, that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he also was born to the giant. And when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemiah, the brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David, and by the hand of his servants. This particular relative of Goliath had a unique feature that distinguished him from every other. He had 6 digits on both hands and feet. He was killed by Jonathan, David's nephew. Now, the question arises, are Goliath and his brothers Nephilim? There are controversies surrounding the true identity of Goliath and his brothers. Some have referenced them as the post-flood Nephilim. However, this idea may not be correct because the Bible does not record that they were Nephilim. Details provided in the scriptures suggest the origin and true identity of Goliath and his brethren, so they are most unlikely to be offspring of humans and angels. Historically, the Philistines descended from the Anakims. Meanwhile, Gath was the stronghold of the Anakims in ancient times, so Goliath and his siblings are more likely to be Rephites than Nephilim. Since the siblings of Goliath were from Rapha of Gath, 2 Samuel chapter 21 verse 16, it can be certain that Goliath was also a Rephite and not a Nephilim. Furthermore, there were giants in other places apart from Philistia, whose origins were not traceable to intermarriage between angels and the daughters of men. For instance, Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 11 says, For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. Although Og was a giant, he was not described as a Nephilim. Although the Bible does not refer to Goliath and his family as Nephilim, it is evident that they are fierce and gigantic. Their unusual size, outlook, and strength must have made people esteem them as modern-day Nephilim. Currently, there are no such giants found on earth that can be compared to the ones David and his men annihilated during those days.